Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. It is Friday, July 5th, 2019. We do have a live show for you today. Got everything a little bit crossed up wires-wise. That's a good way of putting it. I think I've pretty much crossed up the words wires-wise as well. On the front page post announcing that we would be doing a live show this morning, I think we got the Daily Coast Radio page post up on time and as scheduled. I think what happened, well, I don't know. Do you really need to know the technical explanation behind it? I just think we got things crossed up during the holiday. But we are live in case you didn't see that in the morning. If you got up early in the morning, you may have seen on the front page the post that was intended for yesterday's show that didn't go up, but you made it to that show, so I don't really know what to tell you. Maybe that whole thing is just not necessary anymore. But I think it's a good reminder that we are live and we are on and bringing you a brand new show today. Daily Coast Radio being live. Bill in Portland, Maine is up and awake for what we have to offer you today and lets you know that we're live and asks this: is it really true that hologram Trump went back in time to win the War of Independence by bombing the British airport at Yorktown? Kagro X, that's me, David Waldman, pours a stiff one and explores the 15-hour-old oral history behind the legend. It's true. One of the more remarkable things, and I think probably what will stick with most people about yesterday, if you saw any of the speech, if you saw it live, you had to go out of your way to do it. I think only one of the networks carried it, although I don't know who carried the speech. There was some discussion yesterday that ABC, NBC, CBS would not be carrying at least the parade live. I don't know whether they decided to carry his speech or not. Fox News, of course, stuck with him. I didn't get to see any of it on television and didn't want to, but I did see Daniel Dale following it, probably from afar, because it was pouring rain at the time, and what would be the point? So you find a television feed that will cover it and follow along, and I was astonished to see very early on his I don't know whose transcription it was. Somebody attempted to transcribe the thing as it was going on. And, I mean, I don't even know what to tell you. It was a huge mess. And if you're looking to find out what actually happened, and maybe you heard a little bit about it, it's just Trump is old and disoriented and dead and was unable to read the teleprompters correctly, which he couldn't do when he was alive. I'm taking a look at Barbara Morrill's front page, old Barb from Maryland, which she doesn't use that anymore, but those of you who are longtime readers might remember that one. I thought that was kind of a hilarious thing. Barb in Maryland, MD, and everyone thought she was a doctor. Dr. Barbin, tell us what happened in yesterday's speech. She's got a post up this morning. Twitter reacts to Trump's extraordinary history lesson about airports and the Revolutionary War. And maybe this helps explain it. There's a shot of Trump's body double, because Trump is dead, from behind. And believe me, it's a difficult thing to reproduce in a body double. But shot from behind as he stands at the podium, and you can see the holographic projection screen / bulletproof glass that they put in front of Trump / whoever that is supposed to be, and to protect him from his crowd of supporters. Standard operating procedure for presidents, but they decided to do it for this guy too. And it's covered in rain because it was raining cats and dogs, but animatronic Trump / holographic Trump magically had dry hair throughout the thing. Yes, there was probably something over his head, but we just like to say that this was all part of the conspiracy. And you can see the two teleprompter screens at either side and the bright lights that are lighting the stage for the speech, and they are illuminating every drop of rain on that holographic projection screen, and it's a mess that's facing him. You'd have to be pretty skilled and poised to have been able to pull that speech off. Or, maybe 20, 30, 40 years younger than the guy they got up there to pretend was Trump. So it's pretty confusing. And Trump sucks at reading. Well, he did in life anyway. Sucked at reading the teleprompter to begin with. So it's a huge mess, and he can't do it. And I don't even know what to tell you. The original version of the transcript, which I saw retweeted. Let me see if I can find that. It's, I guess, closest to what he actually was able to squeak out by way of reading the speech. But Barb's got a transcript that I think they eventually settled on as the official version of this thing. Let's see. Where would I have put... maybe I have to look in all of my, tweets and replies. But I'll scroll down and see if I can find Daniel Dale's version of this thing, rather than the somewhat cleaned up but still ridiculous and nonsensical version that Barb has got here. I don't know where she borrowed this from. Let me take a look at her link here. USA Today. Okay, so their version of it is slightly more, I don't know, there's more English in it than the Daniel Dale version, which was something closer to what he actually said. Let's see. It's probably, there was a lot of activity on Twitter yesterday, so okay, maybe a few. Well, I don't see it immediately, but let's see if, we'll see if it turns up maybe during one of our breaks, and we've got a couple of those scheduled today. Anyway, I guess the USA Today version will do. Barb was just reporting that it is a well-established fact that the orange buffoon occupying the Oval Office, who's now dead, is an idiot and dead. I added that part. And at Donald Trump's taxpayer-funded 4th of July salute to Donald Trump, he proved it once again with this bit of butchered history. So, the way USA Today would have it, he said, in June... Should I just play the clip? Maybe I can just run those clips. In June of 1775, the Continental Congress created a unified army out of the revolutionary forces encamped around Boston and New York. This was awesome. All right, so it has all those mistakes in it. Do we do his voice? Revolutionary forces encamped around Boston and New York and named after the great George Washington, Commander-in-Chief. You can see what he did there. Of course, he added the of, which, I think we're all susceptible to. I do it from time to time, add those extra words. Of seems to be his favorite thing to add in this speech. I guess, or in this case, he added the word after, named after the great George Washington. What he meant to say was that they created a unified army out of the revolutionary forces encamped around Boston and New York and named the great George Washington Commander-in-Chief of those armed forces, you see. But instead he said, named after the great George Washington. So everyone knows George Washington and Continental Army Washington. He said I could call him either one. They named the Continental Army after the great George Continental Army Washington, which is what I'm saying. The Continental Army suffered a bitter winter of Valley Forge because it's a little two-letter word. I don't know what that AT is. Found glory across the waters of the Delaware and seized victory from Cornwallis of Yorktown. Another great one. At Yorktown? Yes. Okay, so all ats got converted into ofs in this one. And then, of course, the best part. Our army, and this is their best guess at what he was saying. If you hear the tape, maybe I can find the video clip. You've surely seen it by now. It doesn't even qualify as English, but they approximate it as his having said, our army manned the air, it rammed the ramparts, You know, the ramparts we watched, except that was in the War of 1812. Yeah, everybody heard that. It took over the airports. It is, like 15 hours? Is that what Bill said? 15 hours later, I am still laughing out loud. At both took over the airports. And that is the point at which Trump is like, F it, I have ruined this thing. And I'm not reading any more of this sentence. And he just says, they did whatever they had to do. And then quickly back to the text. They did whatever they had to do. Oh, then he bungles Fort McHenry. He says Fort McHenry. But okay, we can forgive that one. Under the rocket's red glare, I've heard that part. It had nothing but victory. And when dawn came, their star-spangled banner waved defiantly, sort of. It was a disgusting mess, and so was the speech. It was pretty amazing, but of course that didn't stop people like Ari Fleischer, sycophant supreme. I don't know whether he's getting money out of this deal or what. He declared it the greatest speech Trump ever gave, which is not a hard thing to do, admittedly, but it wasn't even that. But that really kills me. I would love to know where they took over the airports came from. I guess he saw, the word air in there, maybe something like, or that came to mind when he heard about rockets, red glare, bombs bursting in airports. It was so amazing and so very entertaining. And, people had something to say about it. And there's lots of great Photoshops out there and various video clips that just make it that much more fun. Barb goes on here to say, as the founding fathers and Francis Scott Key rolled over in their graves to say WTF, hilarity ensued on Twitter, which, as we all know, wasn't invented for several hundred years after the Revolutionary War. There's a tweet here from Explain Jane. It says, Dear John, I must caution you most strongly about leading your men to Valley Forge via Atlanta. You will surely sustain delays in navigating this quagmire. We have secured Charlotte, which offers safe passage directly to Philadelphia. Love, Jane. Okay. Revolutionary War airport stories. We have the Twitter account of the Tattooed Grad, allegedly a fellow by the name of Derek Litvak, who says, what is this, like a Geico car commercial or something? They have a video, should I even bother rolling it, of someone dressed up as George Washington driving a car, but what the hell, it's appropriate for this. Actual footage, it says, of the U.S. Army storming the airports during the War of 1812. I'm a little curious as to what this video actually is. Will it, well, it looks to be a George Washington driving in across a field like in a demolition derby or something. It's a short GIF. I don't know where that's from. Let's see. Another tweet that shows Washington crossing the Delaware to secure a nearby rampart after winning the Battle of Reagan National. A shot of the famous Washington crossing the Delaware painting with a plane landing in the background is photoshopped in. Francis Scott Key calls the airline and asks, "Oh, say, can you see if there's an earlier flight?" Says Scott Eric Alt. All sorts of great stuff here. My dear Frederick, they continue to hold us prisoner. All we have been given to eat are small portions of miniature pretzels and no ale or mead. Oh, I have the mead. They torture us with stories of some mythical being called a beverage cart, yet it does not appear. Let's see. Another Photoshop job of Washington crossing the Delaware, rowing his way into a modern airport. Molly Jong Fast tweeting this one around. They were a scrappy bunch of misfits who just wanted to take their water bottles through the TSA checkpoint. Yeah, sometimes they say it was about taxation without representation, but we don't think so. Let's see. Lots of more of the same, and there's lots and lots. I guess we could go on for some time with these things, but I don't know if we would see the point. Are there any really good ones? Well, maybe we'll review them during the break and call those up if necessary. Okay, so that's the that's the report on the parade. I mean, there's not much more to say about it other than the speech was a disaster. It rained on people all the time. I don't know how the fireworks went. I didn't even get to see any of those on TV. It may have cleared up later on. The weather that hits D.C. usually hits our area a little bit before. Trump did manage to squeeze in some golf, reportedly, because, I mean, who knows? He's being dead. I imagine he's very slow to play behind and very frustrating. But he made his way out to the golf course near me, the one in Sterling, early in the morning, at least according to the press pool, which, of course, as you know, don't get to watch him golf, which is because they didn't want anybody to find out he was dead. And I believe he's on his way to the golf course in New Jersey today. That's the public schedule that was published for him last night, that he and Melania were going to fly to Morristown Airport. I thought it was really interesting. The first thing I saw on his public schedule that was he was inbound for Morristown, New Jersey, and I thought, oh, well, that's a little bit of a continuation of the Revolutionary War theme from his speech. Like Valley Forge, Morristown, New Jersey was one of the winter quarters of the Continental Army during the Revolutionary War, and you know it's a well-known local Revolutionary War site. I don't know how many people know about Morristown as opposed to, say, Valley Forge. I think everybody gets taught about the Valley Forge winter, no matter where you live. It may be just New Jerseyans and those nearby enough to make a day trip, field trip during, elementary school to Morristown, New Jersey, who learn about the winter spent there. I'm not really sure whether that's just, local stuff. I mean, it happened. We know that, but I don't know how many people get taught about that one. So I thought it was possible, oh, he's going up there on July 5th because he was down here for July 4th, but he's going to go there and do some sort of, Independence Day event. No, it's just that's the closest airport that can accommodate his transport, Aircraft One, as he sometimes calls it, and get him to Bedminster, where his golf course is. There are airports closer, but I don't know if they have the runways sizable enough to accommodate the plane. I guess he takes Air Force One, even for a short hop like that. And it's really doable in a couple of hours, I think, on the helicopter. But he loves the plane, so that's where he's headed this morning. Allegedly, we'll see whether anybody spots him. Certainly, that speech, though, was the strongest evidence to date that they either, somehow revived him from whatever episode he had a couple of days ago, or found a great body double, or maybe he just wasn't dead after all. I'm not quite prepared to let go of that, but, it's much more fun to just continue, if you ask me, with the assumption that he's dead and that they've found an incompetent body double. All right. So, there was an awful lot floating out there yesterday. I mentioned to Greg yesterday, I think during one of the breaks, and I haven't seen much discussion of it since, and we didn't get a chance to play it, but I wanted to call your attention to this very odd bit here about the... Did I put this aside? Oh, dang. I may have to scroll around and look for that, too. I thought I had parked that one in pocket. But the Axios television show, that is, they are doing a show for HBO, like, I guess along the lines of the Vice News people. I haven't seen it yet, but they managed to get an interview with Trump, which somebody was claiming, anyway, if I can find the thing, that there was a very weird interview that they did manage to air, but that got cut off very abruptly, during which it appeared, and the author of this tweet was wondering why more people weren't talking about it. It looked like Trump was getting so frustrated with the refusal, as he saw it, of the news media to cover him fairly, that he began to tear up, tears welling up in his eyes, and he's choking up, and he has a very, I would say he's red in the face, except it's so hard to tell whether he's red in the face. But he's this is the only time I've ever seen the skin around his eyes, his puffy white eyelids, get color. I think that's how you can tell when he's getting flush. Is that the skin around the skin that lives underneath the eye goggles when he gets his tan or spray tan actually had some color to it. Who was it that was tweeting this around? The Twitter handle here is Shotgun Zen. Identifies himself as Justin Yandel. I'm not certain where he puts the emphasis on this one. And he had an interesting take on this clip here that that he had been crying, or was about to break down crying at the end of this segment here. And the I guess the communications team very abruptly rushes into the Oval Office and breaks up the interview. And it looks like Axios does its best to edit this thing such that they're able to save the footage of the interview and use it on the air. I guess somehow they got permission to still use this thing. But I'm not sure I've ever seen Trump. All you get to see on the air is them abruptly ending this interview. I wonder if I can, you can hear in his voice that there's something going on, but it's not like you see tears rolling down his face. I mean, to be fair, that's not what actually goes on in this thing. Let me see if I can bring this up on the main computer so we can hear the video from it, or the audio from it. Is this going to work if I do this? Let me unmute this thing. It's only about a 20-second clip here. But as it's introduced here by Justin, it says, sorry to interrupt, but how are all not talking about Axios airing an interview with Trump where he's quickly yanked from the room because he starts to cry? He says, has anyone in history of the planet seen this expression on his face before? His eyes welling up and his voice quivering. It's interesting. Let me play the clip and I'll read a little bit more. Oh, will the audio come up or not? Here we are. Okay, it's really amazing. And listen to what he says about himself and what his excuse is for being such an incredible jackass in life in general. Will this now not play now that I've got the volume all correct? Interesting. Okay. Wonder if I can refresh this page and then get it to play. Maybe it'll do it that way. Give me the volume.
About me, I would be the nicest president you've ever seen. It would be much easier. It's much easier for me to be nice because I'm basically a nice person, I hope. It's much easier, Jim, for me to be nice than it is for me to be the way I have to be.
Now, right at that point where he says it's much easier for me to be nice than the way I have to be, at that point, I forget which of the gyms this is that does the old Axios thing. I'm terrible with their names. Is that Jim Vandehey? Is that right? Anyway, the interviewer, is taken aback, and it's hard to tell whether he's taken aback by the people charging into the room to get the president out of there, or whether he's taken aback by the expression on his face and the tears welling up and the weird quaver in his voice. But I'm going to play that through it. Can I play that again?
If they would write accurately about me, I would be the nicest president you've ever seen. It would be
an interesting thing to say even there. I would be the nicest president you've ever seen. Which, basically, the whole shtick behind this, and oh my God, this particular freeze frame I've got here is of Trump's face just entering the frame, except it's the most amazing thing. His hair is hovering over his head. It's crazy. Anyway, his whole shtick about what a a-hole he is look what you made me do. I would be the nicest president if they would write fairly about me. I'm nice. And then he goes on. This is interesting. This sort of thing that you tell yourself, I guess, on your deathbed. I think I'm a nice person. I'm basically a nice person. I like to think of myself as a nice person. You know, his ego at work here telling him he's great. He's actually one of the worst people on the planet. And well, actually Justin's view of his brief dime store psychoanalysis of this clip is pretty good. Let me continue just the rest of it here.
Much easier. It's much easier for me to be nice because I'm basically a nice person, I hope.
You're not.
It's much easier, Jim, for me to be nice than it is for me to be...
Right there, that's it. For me to be... That. Can you hear that again?
It is for me to be the way I have to be.
Now, right at that point where he says be, that's where Jim rocks back. But then also at that point, if you could see the video, and I'll circulate it for you, the rest of the team comes in. That's the end of the interview. What kind of finish is that for a sit-down interview with Axios?
Nice than it is for me to be the way I have to be.
That's it. So it's easier for me to be nice than to be the way I have to be. That's how he puts it. So pretty interesting, and I guess I'll just, as we head out to the rest of to the break here, let me get all those things set up so that we don't lose track of things and get the music started on time. Justin sort of analyzes this thing and saying this is his hypothesis on the whole thing. He deeply misses his old life, and I think that's probably true. He misses the glad handing around New York and L.A. I don't know if he ever did any glad handing around L.A. Because no matter what he did, no one told him no. Because no one told him he was free to be nice, i.e. not abusive, which is the only alternative he sees. Yeah, I'm armchair psychoanalyzing him. Don't at me, as they say on the Twitter machine. I'm presenting an idea. It's up to professionals to make definitive statements, but there's more to it. We'll just discuss it a little bit on the other side, then move on. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Just a brief break, having a tea break because we're in the middle of the Revolutionary War here. On my way to the airport, let's see, catching up the, where did I, now I have to reorganize all the desktops here. So Justin Yandel here, Shotgun Zen. I just retweeted the tweet in which he embeds that video with the KITM hashtag. For those of you listening live, you can check in on that. For those of you listening later on, you can just look on in puzzlement for the meantime. But yes, so it's Justin's thesis here that he just misses his old life where he got to run around doing pretty much whatever he wanted to because he didn't matter very much. He was famous. He didn't have anything to do that was beyond his capacity. And nobody noticed if he did. He could look at fabric swatches all he wanted to, and he misses that. And I will tell you this. I will say this. This I can tell you. The people I know who I really know, who have met him personally and who are generally favorably inclined to him and may even, I know a few people who consider him a friend of sorts and who may or may not have voted for him. I'm not really sure. I know a couple people who have met him in person and have said, oh my God, he's as horrific, every bit as horrific as you think. But a few people, I think they don't know him well. They know him casually, and I think that's the key to it. But I've met a few people who, for instance, do their winters down in Palm Beach and either are members of Mar-a-Lago Club or have been invited to dine at Mar-a-Lago Club when he's around, before he was president, since he's been president. And they insist he's the nicest, most charming fellow, and if you only know him casually and you don't have to do anything of consequence with him and don't have to decide as between yourselves how that thing will go, I'm sure he's very pleasant. He enjoys pleasantly chatting about things, and he loves, making his business decisions and everything, and whenever he's up against you in business, I'm sure he relishes screwing you. But in casual conversation, I think he's, a relatively charming person. And if he sees you a couple times, if you're from around there, if you're a Mar-a-Lago Club member, whatever it is, how are you? He might even remember your name. How's your kids? All that sort of thing. He's very personable, and I think he misses that. And he, I don't know. I mean, I guess he confused being a relatively, a passable social being with adoration, because he's got a huge ego. And, lots of people, of course, are starstruck when they met him, or, perhaps they think they can get a piece of his money because they think he's got it, whatever. So they're very nice to him. So this is it. Again, Justin saying he misses his old life where he could just glad hand around and no one told him no. But very insightful, I think, for him to point out that he was, because no one told him no, he was free to be nice, i.e. not abusive, which is the only alternative he sees. There are many ways you can be with people. Yes, he admits he's doing armchair psychoanalysis, but then he points out again, this binary system between my way or I abuse you tracks with what we know about the relationship between Trump and his father. Again, dime store stuff, but it's something worth thinking about. It tracks with what we've read about the relationship Trump has with his kids as well. I suspect when everything crumbles around him and the books are written of his mindset, this interview will be a moment of great controversy. So far, it hasn't been widely discussed, though, so it may not end up being a moment of great controversy. And I'm sure that the communications office is busy explaining it away by saying, the president simply had something else on his schedule. It wasn't that he was breaking down crying. Although I think this lends credence. So this is baseless speculation Friday here on the show. It lends something to the theory that, for instance, the reason that Ivanka is always around, even in inappropriate moments, like at the G20 or in the DMZ in Korea, is that she's closest to him and is the one that can see the episodes setting in and can see when he's losing his ability to control himself. In a routine situation, not so much that, throwing a tantrum. I think everybody can tell when he's throwing a tantrum. And the biggest success the Trump administration has to its credit so far is they've done about as well hiding actual physical evidence, eyewitness evidence of his tirades from the public. They did about as well as FDR's crew did hiding his polio and paralysis from the public for, and we all know about it now, but they did an awful lot to engineer the White House appearances around that, and I think they've done a pretty good job here, too. This is his best comparison to FDR, I think. Anyway, I think Ivanka is the one that one can see when he's slipping out of control mode and knows about when it happens, knows the signs, and is most adept on her feet at making excuses for moving on. And because she's the Ivanka, people don't stand in the way. She's got credibility to, close down a session in a way that even a Sarah Sanders or whoever else would be in charge of communications, even chief of staff, wouldn't have the ability to do, the credibility with people. She's got, it's not that she's so credible or anything. It's just she's both a White House staffer, and so, in the most general sense, entitled to be there. But also, no one's going to argue very much about a daughter taking care of her father like that. So I think they know in the back of their heads what's going on. They just don't question it. Anyway, I don't know whether that's really true. We don't have much in the way of footage of that either. And Ivanka isn't the one that breaks into the room to cut this off, though you get the sense that she was perhaps the one that dispatched them or trained them in what to look for when he's losing track of it. And, lots of people chimed in on this guy's thread that they have taken care of aging parents who suffer from, Alzheimer's or some other onset of dementia. And they recognize in their own parent a similar symptom of when you get confused and agitated, the tears start to flow. I don't know personally. I have not had that responsibility yet. I assume that's still coming in the future when I take care of my kids that way. My kids are demented, as you know. But I hope that never happens, but I know what the odds are. If you have aging parents or grandparents or whatever, I think we all anticipate that happening, even though, doesn't always, and you could be thankful for that. Anyway, I don't know how accurately they're portraying their own experiences. I can't comment on that part. I just think it starts to ring true. Lots of people say this. Many people are saying it. And so what can I tell you? That's got to be true. But all right. So let's see. It says, Justin was saying it tracks with what we've read about the relationship with his kids. I suspect when everything crumbles around him and the books are written, this interview will be a moment of great controversy. And now, I guess he sees it as possible to play one of two ways, which he expresses in his next tweet as quotes. He was showing regret over the strong-arm tactics he feels he needs to use to fight against the whatever. Is that what it was that was moving him to tears? Or was it, as Justin says he happens to believe, he desperately misses the days when people let him do crimes and said, "This way to the ladies' dressing room, Mr. Trump." He says, I happen to believe it's the latter, and that one is the one that rings more true for me as well. I think this would say a great deal about a great deal. Abusive parenting, patriarchy, white privilege, wealth privilege, and the way we treat mental health disorders. If we removed one of those, would Trump be a better person? If we removed all of them, what would he be? And no matter how you feel about Trump, this is a verbal confirmation he knows the difference between right and wrong, nice and not nice. He is simply unable or unwilling to choose the path of decency. Unable or unwilling. Either one disqualifies him to lead the country. So, yeah. I thought that was pretty interesting. There's a couple more comments that he makes. For instance, he questions, is it a standard procedure for the POTUS to be whisked away when he or she starts to tear up? Or is this a known occurrence these particular people are familiar enough with to recognize and react to in seconds? Or is it Ivanka in the background saying, go, go, go? This is getting some mileage suddenly, he says about it. So to give it new context, consider Pence's emergency callback the other day and the census question being dropped seemingly without Trump's permission. I submit Trump had an episode the other day during which someone tried to right the ship. This is not when this interview was made, but he takes it as evidence that this could be what was happening. Further speculation, he says, is this what Speaker Pelosi saw the day he allegedly threw a temper tantrum? Afterwards, she said she prays for him and the country. An emotional breakdown similar to this would surely prompt that response, in my opinion. And I don't know. Let's see. There's a couple more comments that he makes on it, but I think that pretty much wraps up the important ones. This, by the way, I saw at about the same time that I saved this to pocket, can I at least have done this, that I saw there was a, no, it's not it either. Was it a New York Times piece or a Post piece where they were talking about the fact that the national parks were going to be ponying up they weren't even ponying up. They were just losing control of $2.5 million to pay for yesterday's party on the mall. And by the way, I guess the big discussion in the papers today and the way they could put the best spin on things from yesterday, besides the disastrous speech, and thereby perhaps gain the president's favor or enough of it in order to continue getting access to the Oval Office so that they can produce exact transcripts of how completely out of it he really is. The papers were saying, well, to his credit, he did not, as his critics thought he might, use the opportunity for a very bitterly partisan speech, which would have put him in, his administration anyway, in greater legal jeopardy. He kept it to the mostly anodyne, non-political content yesterday, so as not to create a new controversy. And he did that pretty well. I mean, I would say he stuck to the script of what was on the teleprompter, except that he actually did not do that. He couldn't do that. He did his best to do that, and I guess that's what counts. We give him credit for trying. Is that basically it? So he didn't do anything explicitly partisan, and that was supposed to be the great triumph. Once again, he doesn't vomit on himself, so he truly becomes president that particular day. Anyway, that's, I think, the best that they were able to get out of him so far in terms of reviews. But I was reading yesterday where, I'll have to scroll once again, live on the air, scrolling around looking for the tweet I'm looking for. I got the impression that I'm not certain that Twitter, or rather Pocket, is working exactly the way I think. I'm fairly certain I'm pocketing most of these things for discussion, but not all of them are showing up these days. So I'll have to check on how that's working. But there was I think maybe Washington Post write-up of where the money was coming from, mentioning the $2.5 million that was going to be diverted from the National Park Service to pay for this, because the National Park Service controls the mall, so you wouldn't have to move it as between departments. But as Joan was mentioning yesterday, they're strapped for cash as it is. Now, in addition to them yanking money from out of their budget to pay for this party that Trump wanted to throw for his donors, there was mention in this article, if I can find it, of a discussion that takes place in the White House, though it's unclear in the end whether or not this is something they are actually going to try to do or would even need to do. But the discussion was, not only should we take this $2.5 million from the budget of the National Park Service, but that we can think about directing that the money comes specifically from the budgets of national parks that are in traditionally liberal areas of the country, so that the budget bite of this comes directly out of the libs. We can own the libs some more by directing that their national parks, whatever those might be, are the ones that suffer, whereas the ones in Republican territory, I don't know, nothing happens to them, and yada, yada, yada. I guess I don't know whether it's actually something that they can do. It's not clear that it was anything that they could really actually follow up on and make happen, but it was under discussion. And right now, so far, I don't know. There was so much activity, I can't actually find this thing, but I'm pretty sure I can come up with it during one of the breaks and make it available. Anyway, I think there was also some discussion yesterday of of course, everyone was thinking about the tanks. And as it turns out, I think we had read the other day that the White House spokespeople were on the record. One of the spokespeople was on the record saying, denying that there was a ticketed event going on. Right? There was some controversy bubbling up about why is it that there's a VIP area? Why is it that it's closed off? Why is it that it's ticketed? And why is it that the Republican National Committee is the one in charge of distributing tickets to this thing? Though it wasn't overtly political content in the speech, we still have the problem of an area of the mall being sealed off around the president for a VIP area, access to which was distributed by one of the political parties, and presumably that it was done with political favors in mind, either to big donors or to people who they thought they could rely on for political support. Either way, it ends up being some sort of inside in-kind deal for Republicans only to be able to see this speech. As it turns out, the tanks and or armored personnel carriers that the president managed to order be present for the speech were also parked in this restricted area. So there was some coverage yesterday from reporters on the street talking to people watching the parade who were expressing their confusion and disappointment. I was told there were going to be tanks in this parade, and there aren't any. A parade went on, but there were no tanks in it. What happened to that? Of course, they're not likely to come away by saying, Trump's a liar, I'll never vote for him again. But the actual fact is that he did get a hold of those military vehicles, and he parked them in the area that was fenced off for VIPs. So they were essentially props to entertain the politically selected crowd that he allowed to be near him during the speech. It wasn't something for all Americans to see so that it would inspire them to thank the troops or anything like that. I don't think anybody really believed it was going to come off that way, and it didn't. So there's that. Also, of course, it's kind of funny that they ended up parking. They didn't even touch the ground, these tanks. They trucked them in on these tractor trailers, and they just left them basically on the low flat beds of the trailers, and put some AstroTurf around the front and back of the tank so that it looked like it was on a grassy knoll of some kind. It was really pretty ridiculous. Anyway, I don't see this thing I was looking for, but it does exist. Anyway, we'll see if we can't find it during the 1 minute break at the top of the hour. And I guess use the time between now and that break to try and pick up on a few of the other stories floating out there. Was it Tuesday, perhaps? Or maybe it was Wednesday. We gave some time to the Virginia off-year elections angle on the gun issue. That is that we have upcoming on the 9th the special session of the Virginia legislature to consider gun safety legislation. There was a national angle on the NRA, which has been reported over the last couple of days, and I thought I'd grab this Politico item. And you have, of course, seen it covered over at Daily Kos as well. The piece is NRA Meltdown Has Trump Campaign Sweating. It's not just Virginia where things are under fire, but Virginia being where the Fairfax, Virginia being where the NRA's lobbying headquarters building is. The one with the shooting range in the basement, or think in the basement, where the NRA instructor accidentally shot himself, Ooh, that reminds me, we should catch up on how many, if anybody was injured by falling rounds yesterday during the one of the two biggest days of the year for gun fail, New Year's Eve and July 4th, when, of course, people fire their guns up into the air because something. I guess America, well, maybe they were firing at the rain clouds. America hates rain when its president is trying to talk about the airports conquered during the Revolutionary War. Anyway, NRA meltdown has Trump campaign sweating. Republicans worry that the NRA and two other groups that have long formed the core of their electoral infrastructure will be effectively on the sidelines. Very interesting, and I guess especially worrisome for them if it turns out, as we all suspect is the case, that the NRA was a great conduit for dark money, and in particular Russian money, to move into campaign coffers. But I feel fairly certain that they'll find another funnel for that money, and that we'll spend, regardless of the outcome of the election, we'll probably spend the year or so after the election trying to track that down. The good news is if we win the election, I guess the bad news, sort of, the good news is if we win the election. The bad news is that when we win the elections, we tend to say things like, well, let's not look backward. We have a legislative agenda to attend to. As you know, the election was entirely about infrastructure and healthcare. We have to turn our attention to half-assing those two things, and we can't be wasting our time investigating a moot question of whether or not Donald Trump cheated to win the election when he has lost the election. And that's probably the best exit strategy Trump has going for him, is that he can just say, well, I'm not the president anymore, so what are you bothering me about? And America tends to go along with that, you know, for the good of the country and all, because if you let it go, it'll never happen again. Anyway, back to the story. The National Rifle Association aired an avalanche of TV ads and pushed its 5 million plus members, more or less, to the polls for Donald Trump in 2016, propelling him in Rust Belt states that delivered him the presidency. I mean, the ones that Comey didn't deliver. Now, the gun rights group is in total meltdown, and senior Republicans and Trump 2020 officials are alarmed. In recent weeks, the NRA has seen everything from a failed coup attempt to the departure of its longtime political architect, to embarrassing tales of self-dealing by top leaders. The turmoil is fueling fears that the organization will be profoundly diminished heading into the election, leaving the Republican Party with a gaping hole in its political machinery. With the Chamber of Commerce and Koch political network withdrawing from their once dominant roles in electing conservatives, Republicans worry that three organizations that have long formed the core of the electoral infrastructure will be effectively on the sidelines. The predicament has so troubled some Republicans that they are calling on the famously secretive NRA to address its 2020 plans. Within the past week, senators have privately expressed concerns about the group to National Republican Senatorial Committee Chairman Todd Young. No organization has been more important to conservative voter education and engagement than the NRA. We all hope they are able to mount the kind of effort in 2020 that they have in the past, said Greg Keller, a former American Conservative Union executive director. But in case they can't, given their current situation, I hope they're being forthright about that within the movement so others can pick up the slack. The situation, he added, has folks nervous. I don't think they have the bandwidth, if you will, to spend any time taking care of business. They're busy stabbing each other in the back, which is ironic, given that they should be shooting one another in the back, don't you think? What makes the NRA such a potent force for Republicans, party officials said, are its reach into battlegrounds such as Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Ohio, and the sway it holds with its members. The NRA appeals play a critical role in turning out sportsmen, that's their favorite term for it, many of whom have paid dues to the organization for years and regard it as an important part of their lives. The dues are nothing, by the way, to the NRA. It doesn't count for anything. You can get a lifetime membership for $25. I don't know that there's anybody that pays annual dues to the organization except the corporate members, those who manufacture the guns. And they call the real shots now these days. Chris LaCivita, a national GOP strategist who's waged congressional and statewide campaigns in North Carolina, said he remains confident gun advocates will turn out to vote in 2020. That's probably true. But he said the NRA's problems could hobble its mobilization efforts. Infighting and accusations playing out almost daily in the national media regarding the NRA have not been helpful. Clearly, it will have an impact in the NRA's ability to raise money, for itself anyway, which would be used in elections to turn out its membership, LaCivita said. That's ignoring the more likely role that they played in 2016, which was just as a conduit, though. With the organization mired in palace intrigue and confronting the daily barrage of negative publicity, some NRA officials are skeptical a 2020 plan will emerge. Many Republicans are convinced the job of turning out Second Amendment supporters will fall to the cash-flush Republican National Committee, which is constructing a massive get-out-the-vote and data machine. They're really good at that, by the way. No, not really. Devoted to turning out conservatives. Jane Timken, chairwoman of the Ohio GOP. They're not bad at turning out the vote. They're just bad at building new mechanisms for it, if you ask me. Anyway, when they do online things. So, Jane Timken, chairwoman of the Ohio GOP, said her organization would work closely with the RNC to micro-target firearms owners. The National Party, Timken noted, has compiled extensive voter data through sources ranging from gun licenses to gun magazine subscriptions, which is, I guess, why they're secretly in favor of gun licensing. It's good for your database. Concerns over the NRA intensified last week after the resignation of Chris Cox, who had been head of the lobbying arm since 2002. Cox was well liked by NRA staff and board members and had deep relationships with major donors and many of the party's top strategists. He recently participated in a 2020 planning meeting with the pro-Trump America First Action Super PAC and the Anti-Tax Club for Growth. The groups discussed polling and opposition research, voter registration efforts, and ensuring smooth coordination, which, of course, is something there's not supposed to be any of, but what the hell. Anyway, that's as between the campaign and them. They can coordinate with each other. That's actually true. With Cox gone, it's an open question who will oversee the NRA's 2020 strategy. Chris Cox is the guy everybody dealt with, said Stephen Law, president of the Senate Leadership Fund, a super PAC closely aligned with Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. That is to say, Mitch McConnell's leadership PAC. I don't know why they don't just say it that way. Let's see. Jason Ouimet. I'm guessing Ouimet? I don't know. Have we met, Jason? You tell me. Oh, it's Ouimet. A director of federal affairs at the organization is expected to assume Cox's role on an interim basis. We met Cox, really? Okay, well, whatever. That's about how most weekends go around here, I guess, right? Well, it depends what you have to do each day. All right, we'll be back after this 1 minute break after digging ourselves into a terrible hole. We'll be out. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I guess we'll continue on with this NRA story just to see if there's anything else worth mining from this particular article, where we left off after finding out that they were going to replace Mr. Cox with Mr. Ouimet. If I'm pronouncing that correctly, I just found that really entertaining. Let's see. Ouimet's appointment, NRA officials said, is designed to temporarily stave off a mass staff exodus and calm both the organization's members and the broader conservative world. Anyone who chooses to discount us does so at their peril, Ouimet said in a statement after this story was published. The NRA is, so it's an update, I guess. The NRA, that's an interesting way of putting it, isn't it? This happened after this was published, which is now. The NRA is poised to mobilize the tens of millions of Second Amendment supporters in upcoming elections. The organization's troubles are hard to overstate. The most serious threat is an investigation by New York State Attorney General's office into its tax-exempt status. In April, NRA President Oliver North was ousted in an ugly public spectacle in which he declared the group was in clear crisis. News organizations have also reported that NRA Chief Executive Wayne LaPierre used $275,000 of the group's money to buy luxury clothes at Zegna in Beverly Hills, California. How elitist. And that the organization logged tens of thousands of dollars in other expenses that benefited its officials. It's not exactly in keeping with their everyman, blue-collar, just love my guns image, is it? Trump weighed in on the NRA's problems Tuesday morning, tweeting that the group is a victim of political harassment by New York State and Governor Cuomo. And herein are embedded the tweets in which that happens. I don't think we actually need to consider their genuine text here. But Ken Blackwell, an NRA board member who is active with an array of conservative groups, disputed the idea that Cox's departure and the subsequent turmoil would sideline the group in 2020. The NRA's turnout efforts, he said, were largely orchestrated at the state and local levels. Chris was good at what he did, but he was not the reservoir of ground action Blackwell said. This notion that there was someone sitting behind the green curtain. What? Yeah. Sitting behind the green curtain, that's not even a thing, in Washington, driving the base turnout, it was a misnomer, which also is the wrong word for what he's describing here. I don't really know why he's putting it that way, but, well, he is. Anyway, I'm just curious about this. Is this the same Ken Blackwell who was the Ohio Secretary of State, or is this a different Ken Blackwell? I'm curious now. Let me just look at the Wikipedia on that. Does it say what the Ken Blackwell from Ohio is up to these days? It says he's currently a senior fellow for family empowerment with the Family Research Council, which is the same sort of activity, but it's not NRA activity, so it must just be a different guy. I think we asked that question once before and found out it wasn't him. But my memory isn't what Trump's used to be, back when he was alive. Others argued that with Democratic presidential candidates vowing to enact stricter gun control laws, firearms owners will be sufficiently motivated to keep Trump in office. They won't even need the NRA, or at least the money anyway. Issues surrounding the Republican Party's outside infrastructure go beyond the NRA. The Chamber of Commerce, a key player in Republican politics over the past decades, spent just $10 million during the 2018 cycle, about a third of what it spent during the previous election cycle, according to the Center for Responsive Politics. The scale back has led many to believe the organization, a staple of the business community, is preparing to play a diminished role in 2020. Other clues have emerged. In April, chamber leaders told the Washington Post that they were seeking to rebrand the organization as a bipartisan outfit. And in January, Rob Engstrom stepped down as national political director, a role the chamber is in the process of filling. People familiar with the arrangement said Engstrom remains a consultant with the organization. Scott Reed, the group's chief political strategist, denied the group is retrenching. This fall, he said the chamber would launch a multi-million-dollar effort to defend the Republican Senate majority. We will be spending money earlier this cycle on the Senate than we've ever spent in the 100-year history of the chamber, he said. Meanwhile, the Koch network is gradually shifting away from partisanship, I doubt that, and toward policy issues like addressing poverty, which they don't have a real interest in, and drug addiction. Amazing. Unless they feel their deaths coming on, that could be. The network, which like the chamber has at times found itself at odds with the president, plans to sit out the 2020 presidential race and is recasting itself as in a nonpartisan fashion. I don't think anybody should allow that to happen. Emily Seidel, chief executive of the Koch-backed Americans for Prosperity, penned a memo last month in which she announced the outfit is open to backing candidates from either party. No thanks. The new approach has rankled some longtime Koch donors who complain the powerful network, which played a pivotal role in helping Republicans capture the Senate majority, is abandoning the GOP. Oh no. Koch officials dispute that they are pulling back, noting they've endorsed a handful of GOP senators who align with the network's goals. When the network gathered in Colorado Springs, Colorado over the weekend, and I guess that was the previous weekend, its members were joined by a small group of Republicans facing re-election, including Kentucky Governor Matt Bevin and Georgia Senator David Perdue. The uncertainty surrounding all three groups is likely to increase pressure on America First Action, a super PAC devoted to backing Trump. It's devoted to it. Interesting. If a void needs to be filled in 2020, we will fill it and continue to work with those allies that are willing to step into the breach to help re-elect Donald Trump, America First spokeswoman Kelly Sadler said. To others, though, the developments are a potential sign of danger ahead. David McIntosh, still alive, the president of the Club for Growth and a former Republican congressman, said he was particularly troubled by the Koch network's decision to refocus its efforts. After Barack Obama's 2008 election, he noted, the network filled a vacuum by providing a devastated party with much-needed infrastructure. Right now, the party is functioning, McIntosh said, but if you see another collapse or if we lose the White House, I think you're going to see Republicans, frankly, in a world of hurt without a major funding group like that. Well, we can only hope. But I have no doubt that they will just find another conduit for Russian money if that's still in the offing for them. All right. shifting gears for just a few minutes and giving us a chance to reset and try and find some of the material that I was interested in digging up earlier. I want to turn to a pre-recorded piece that I'm going to have to do a little bit of engineering for, if you'll just bear with me. But our good friend and listener, Peace Arena, who you know her from Twitter as Peace Arena, who goes also there by the name along with the handle of Serena Blaze, has recorded this piece for us, and I guess I'm going to have to go to iTunes to play this one. It's a little longer than my soundboard can handle. But she's got, let me introduce the piece here. She had written me a couple days ago with this piece in mind, and here's, let's see what it's about here. It's actually about the growing phenomenon of news deserts, essentially of smaller towns, in some cases actually even larger cities around the country, losing their local newspapers, which, you know, I mean, obviously we all can understand the effect of this. Oh, I think this may already be in my iTunes. Well, we'll see. Anyway, we'll try and roll this thing. But there's a great portion of this piece which points up something really interesting, an ancillary effect of losing your local newspaper, especially when there are no other locals around, that I would never have anticipated, but now that it's brought to light, makes a great deal of sense. And I mean, it hints at an additional reason to take action to preserve local news reporting, though I'm not certain that there's any model for bringing forward the kind of funding that it would take to make it possible. But it suggests an economic argument for it to be done, even if you can't convince people to do it. Let me just roll it, and then that way she can explain it herself, and I will share with you, of course, through Scott Anderson later on, the articles upon which the piece draws. Let's see if we can't get it rolling and playing here.
Good morning, David. What I have to share with you and your listeners today is an article I found on CityLab. That is at citylab.com, and it is a project of the Atlantic magazine, and they basically investigate, research, and promote issues and ideas for metropolitan areas. This article was published on May 30th, 2018, written by Kristen Capps, and it's called The Hidden Cost of Losing Your City's Newspaper. Without watchdogs, government costs go up, according to new research. When local newspapers shut their doors, communities lose out. People and their stories can't find coverage. Politicos take liberties when it's nobody's job to hold them accountable. What the public doesn't know winds up hurting them. The city feels poor politically and culturally. According to a new working paper, local news deserts lose out financially, too. Cities where newspapers closed up shop saw increases in government costs as a result of the lack of scrutiny over local deals, say researchers who tracked the decline of local news outlets between 1996 and 2015. Disruptions in local news coverage are soon followed by higher long-term borrowing costs for cities. Costs for bonds can rise as much as 11 basis points after the closure of a local newspaper, a finding that can't be attributed to other underlying economic conditions, the authors say. Those civic watchdogs make a difference to the bottom line. Paul Gao, an associate professor of finance at the University of Notre Dame and one of the paper's authors, was inspired to look into the issue after an episode of Last Week Tonight with John Oliver about the news industry. Quote, he was focused on two things: consolidation of national news media, and closure of local news media. John Oliver's show really gave us the prompt for the phenomenon, and we started thinking about it from an economist's point of view, unquote. The survey covers some 1,596 English-language newspapers serving 1,266 counties in the U.S. over the study period. This paper excludes counties without any local daily newspaper, 1,863 in all. Across the relevant counties, the study finds 296 newspaper exits, which refers to a local paper closing down or being absorbed by another outlet, or publishing fewer than 4 days a week, or merging to form a new newspaper. Depressingly, the paper finds that news shrinkage is a nationwide phenomenon. Discounting the media-rich counties, which could absorb the hit of a lost daily, as well as the places that added a newspaper, they exist, a total of 204 counties saw a decrease in local coverage to 2 or fewer daily newspapers. By examining local municipal bond data for these counties, the researchers were able to suss out a relationship between local newspaper closures and public finance outcomes. In the 3 years following a newspaper closure, the cost for municipal bonds and revenue bonds increased for these cities. That's likely the result of losing the investigative services these ink-stained wretches once provided. There are already papers that show that there are political consequences or political outcomes when local newspapers close, says co-author Chang Lee, assistant professor of finance at the University of Illinois, Chicago. But that's not really a direct impact on local residents, he continued. We wanted to show that if you look at the municipal bond market, you can actually see the financial consequences that have to be borne by local citizens as a result of newspaper closures. End of quote. Think of a municipal bonds offering yield as the interest rate that municipalities pay for borrowing money in the bond market, Gao says. High offering yield means that a city or county has to promise to pay more in coupons, semi-annual payments to bondholders, or more principal for whatever the city is borrowing. Secondary yields, on the other hand, are the interest rates for bonds as they trade in the market, more of a proxy or indicated rate of a city's financial well-being. Without investigative daily reporters around to call bullshit on City Hall, 3 years after a newspaper closes, that city or county's municipal bond offering yields increased on average by 5.5 basis points, while bond yields in the secondary market increased by 6.4 basis points. Statistically significant effects. Rate hikes are even more pronounced for revenue bonds, and they run higher all around in states with low internet usage and poor governance. Here's a tidy explanation from the paper for the relationship between hard-nosed local reporters and revenue bonds. Revenue bonds are commonly issued to finance local projects such as schools and hospitals and are backed by the revenues generated by those projects. General obligation bonds, on the other hand, are typically used to finance public works projects such as roadways and parks and are backed by local taxes and fees. Revenue bonds should be subject to greater scrutiny because of the free cash flows that those projects generate, and these bonds are rarely regulated by the state government. A local newspaper provides an ideal monitoring agent for these revenue-generating projects, as mismanaged projects can be exposed by investigative reporters employed by the local newspaper. When a newspaper closes, this monitoring mechanism also ceases to exist, leading to a greater risk that the cash flows generated by these projects will be mismanaged. End of quotation. The Rocky Mountain News, for example, won 4 Pulitzer Prizes in the 2000s before it closed at the end of that decade. The paper was known for its investigative reporting, especially with regard to local government deals surrounding the Denver International Airport. 3 years after that paper shuttered, the median yield spread for new local municipal bonds increased by 5.3 basis points. In the meantime, the Denver Post has been subject to devastating budget cuts. One key task for the researchers was to establish that higher bond costs were the result of a decline in local investigative reporting and not, say, crumbling economic conditions. They addressed this concern in a number of ways. First, to keep things local, they excluded state bonds from their analysis. Second, in order to compare apples with apples, they looked at the difference in borrowing costs between a county that lost its fish rep with a similarly sized and scaled neighboring county, a control, that didn't. There could be an underlying economic state that drives both variables, the newspaper closure and borrowing costs, says Dermot Murphy, the paper's third author, also at the University of Illinois at Chicago. That's where we have to get a little bit more sophisticated with our test to establish the causal connection from newspaper closures to borrowing costs. Gall, Lee, and Murphy also looked at Craigslist as an indicator. A harbinger of doom for newsprint media, Craigslist arrival in a city could spell disaster for smaller regional newspapers, as residents moved from selling their junk or searching for roommates in paid classifieds to online, and other advertisers left with them. For counties within 30 miles of a city where Craigslist opened up shop, the probability of a newspaper closure increased by 9.6%. Similarly, outside the central Craigslist hubs, think Boston or San Francisco, municipal bond costs rose too. The team presented its findings at the Society for Financial Studies Cavalcade at Yale University earlier in May, and it's the subject of a discussion at the Brookings Institution in July. The paper has yet to be published. It joins a growing body of research examining the wide-ranging impacts of local news decertification, from heightened susceptibility to post-truth politics to alarming gaps in our national surveillance of infectious diseases. For fans of local newspapers, the outlook isn't rosy. As important as local investigative reporting may be to local capital markets, the researchers don't expect local newspapers to rebound on their own, even though it might cost taxpayers a lot more in the long run to lose a local daily than it would to subscribe to one. Our analysis suggests that newspaper companies, or the information they provide, is a public good and it's worth providing, Lee says. But if we don't finance it, no one will produce it.
Pretty amazing.
That's it, David.
All
Back
right.
to you. This
Thanks
is Serena
very much.
Blaze from Oklahoma.
Thank you, Serena. And yeah, that was I found that really fascinating, and I think a point worth reiterating, and something that I should set some economists that I know, let's say, to studying the idea that the closure of the local newspaper has a pretty direct economic impact in the city, and it's not about losing jobs or losing advertising revenue or anything like that, but that the watchdog function of local news, having been eliminated from the scene, essentially, leaves the local government more or less unmonitored in its activities, and that there's a high correlation with the loss of a local news watchdog and mismanagement of funds that leads directly to a higher premium having to be paid to bond purchasers in that municipality or in that county. What an interesting idea. Like, without a newspaper looking over the shoulder of city or county managers and how they spend the money that they raise for various projects, the mismanagement incidents tend to mount, and bondholders will demand a higher premium for risking their money on this thing, and that ends up coming out of the pockets of the taxpayers. I mean, it's easy to see and easy to understand. It's just going to be extraordinarily difficult to translate into, and so what? So therefore, local governments have an interest in subsidizing news operations. They're not likely to be convinced of that. Local what? And it's not like bondholders are going to be induced to invest instead in newspaper and news reporting infrastructure so that they don't get higher interest rates on their, they might want to protect their investments, but I think they'd rather just simply take the higher interest rates on the bonds. It's a pretty interesting phenomenon, and not certain how you can translate that. It's just as difficult as any other puzzle about how to translate the way people value the news into people actually paying for the news. All right. Well, That was, thanks very much, Serena, for bringing that to our attention. A total diversion from things today, but a needed break as well. I really appreciate your having sent that in. Let me see. I grabbed, just for fun, I decided to take a look around and see if I could find that stream of video clips of the president's, the body doubles speech that we heard about, just for the fun of having us play it, because it's always good for a chuckle, I think. Let me see what I got here. Aaron Rupar, of course, was distributing a lot of these things, and well, let's see. The first one I think he has here, I think the big hit of the day, of course, the recounting of the bravery of the Continental Army during the Revolutionary War, certainly my favorite.
It ran the ramparts. It took over the airports. It did everything it had to do. And at Fort McHenry, under the rocket's red glare, it had nothing but victory.
What a stilted way of putting everything. But I love that part. By the way, Laura Ingraham apparently out there now on Twitter defending the president and insisting that, oh, big deal, he misspoke. They took over the ports, the seaports, not the airports. But I guess he might have seen ports, and who knows whether the word air was in there or not. And he made it into the airports. And this is her way of defending the whole thing. And I mean, it was a pretty big screw up. We're quite honestly, you know what, whether he got that right or wrong, whether that was ports or airports. I mean, they rammed the ramparts. I'm not certain what we're supposed to make of that, but damn those ramparts. They should have been rammed earlier. All right, let's put the rest of this clip here.
And when dawn came, their star-spangled banner waved defiant.
The crowd barely sure about whether they're supposed to applaud that one at the outset. What else does Aaron have here? He's just, I guess I should comb through his collection of these videos, although it's probably a couple hours old now, and I have to try and find where we can turn these up. There was a great thing in there, too. Something else that cracked me up was, I guess he was, the theme of the speech was that he was paying tribute to each of the branches of the armed forces. And when he got around to the Coast Guard, I think, there was another, like, I guess, contextless. It was just, I don't know what to tell you. It was a confusing garbage fire, to say the very least. Where is this one here? There were a couple of clips that he planted out there, including, let's see, Trump has promised to plant the American flag on Mars. Let's see, there's Trump speaking on his holographic projection screen. I'm not certain which one it was that was the... let's see, none of them are all that long. Let's see, what's he saying about this one? Well, this is awkward.
To conquer or die.
Ah, yes, to conquer or die. Okay. All right. I don't think that's... I guess what is awkward here is that they're showing most of the crowd not actually applauding in all of this. There's one guy swigging booze from a hip flask in the middle of the thing. There's the planting the American flag on Mars. At one point, Trump is just reading out a name of prominent Americans. Out of context, it's very difficult to tell what the hell he thought he was doing with that one. What's this one? Let's see.
His final question embodied devotion that sails with every Coast Guardsman. Did they get off?
Wow. Well, so that's kind of awkward all by itself. And by the way, that's a sound clip I should probably just isolate and use all the time. See if we can.
Guardsmen, did they get off?
I am sure that has historical context, and that he's speaking about a famous Coast Guardsman, and it sounds like perhaps it might have been a Coast Guard personnel who were perhaps maybe ferrying soldiers to the D-Day landing or something like that, and they were wondering about whether or not they got off the ship. But anyway, he mangles the delivery of that one. And then what's most interesting is he reads it with this dramatic voice, and the crowd is unsure. Like, is this an applause line? Is this where we're supposed to applaud his fabulous delivery? We're not sure what. And so there's this weird
his
pause
final
of this,
question
right?
embodied devotion that sails with every Coast Guardsman. Did they get off?
Awkward. Okay.
On
we'll
D-Day, the Coast Guard's famous Matchbox fleet.
Matchbox
served valiantly.
fleet. Okay, I'm not certain what that's supposed to be. The famous Matchbox fleet of the Coast Guard from D-Day. I think everybody knows about that one. All right, I think we can be done making fun of him though. But all right, we'll take a 2-minute break, regroup, come on back, and decide what to hit you with on your way back into the rest of your fabulous July 4th weekend. Hope you have some good plans, and I hope none of it is trying to decipher what the hell dead President Trump is talking about. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal. Except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We got a couple minutes here to wrap up and send you into the weekend well prepared for other discussion. Let's see what I've got here in pocket. There's a couple of things I definitely wanted to bring to your attention, just sort of randomly. We'll make you aware of this one here from Vox, just so you can stock up appropriately if necessary. Vox News reporting from Jen Kirby the other day. Cheese and whiskey are targeted in the U.S.'s latest proposed tariffs on the EU. Whiskey would be a retaliatory tariff, I think, against the EU. The EU having, along with China and Mexico, having put tariffs on American whiskey exports to their markets because they knew that would hurt us. And I think they might even have had an idea of targeting Mitch McConnell with those things. Of course, they ended up shooting themselves in the foot down there in Kentucky the other day by accidentally, somehow, I think a lightning strike, they said, was responsible for setting the Jim Beam plant on fire. Actually, a warehouse where they were storing, I think what they said, 45,000 barrels of Jim Beam bourbon. No loss for me. I'm not really that big of a bourbon. I like bourbon as much as the next guy, but not my drink, so screw the rest of you. You know, this is the way we work in America these days. But lighting a warehouse of bourbon on fire, I'm sure, upset a lot of you. And apparently, though, even worse, if you're not a drinker but you're an environmentalist, or worse, both, apparently what happens when you do that is not that the alcohol bursts into flame and harmlessly combusts into the atmosphere, which probably wouldn't be harmless anyway. But in fact, I guess the barrels burst and the bourbon just leaks. And so 45,000 barrels, I'm sure some of it, vaporized and burned off, but the rest of the 45,000 barrels worth of bourbon leaked into the river nearby. Which river? I don't know. The Drunk Fish River, I guess, now. And I don't know whether there's a fish kill going on or what. But let's see. If I can grab you that news, I'll include that in the roundup here. That wasn't what I was thinking of. Instead, I was thinking of the next round of retaliatory tariffs here. But let me Google this so that we can get that on tap for you. No pun intended. You don't tap bourbon anyway. So we can share it with you in the roundup. But now back to the cheese and whiskey targets here. This would mostly affect you if you're looking to import any of their stuff, I guess. Cheese and whiskey now being targeted by the U.S. for tariffs. I don't know how much whiskey is coming in from the EU, but cheese is, of course, a big deal. U.S. wants to add new tariffs on $4 billion in goods as part of a trade dispute involving Boeing and Airbus. That's who we're going to screw up your cheese imports for. The Trump administration is threatening to impose more tariffs on the European Union, $4 billion worth, which could affect everything from cheese to olives to whiskey. I'm okay with all of that. Along with less delicious things, as it says here, like some metals and chemicals. And I don't know, have you tried any of them? I don't think people should turn their noses up at them. Honestly, every once in a while I try cheese. It just doesn't work for me. Look at how delicious this array of European cheeses looks. It's very appetizing looking, and I wish that I could eat it. It looks fantastic. It's probably best for me that I not, but I feel like I'm missing out. In April, the U.S. Trade Representative proposed tariffs on EU products valued at about $21 billion. The original list of products included everything from artists' brushes to essential oils to helicopters. That is a hell of a list. This extra $4 billion would put an additional 89 items on the list, including more cheeses, pasta, and some Scotch and Irish whiskeys. That's the hard part. Yeah, okay. I'm thinking like bourbon and rye. We're not importing that from them, but Scotch and Irish whiskeys. How could that not occur to me? The answer is that's not what I'm drinking. This trade fight is the latest in a 15-year battle over aviation subsidies that long predates President Donald Tariffs Are the Greatest Trump. Well, he died, so I don't understand why they're bothering with this. In 2004, the United States filed a claim with the World Trade Organization accusing some EU countries of illegally subsidizing the aircraft giant Airbus, which the U.S. said harmed the American company Boeing. In 2005, the EU filed a competing claim saying that the U.S. government provided subsidies and tax breaks to Boeing. So there. The Airbus-Boeing dispute has dragged on for years. In May of 2018, a WTO panel gave the U.S. a win, saying the EU had failed to end the Airbus subsidies, thus clearing the way for the U.S. to retaliate. The U.S. was expected to take countermeasures to the tune of billions of dollars worth in tariffs. It announced its proposed punishment in April with tariffs on goods valued at $21 billion. Now the additional $4 billion, which the USTR said it's considering in response, quote, to public comments and additional analysis. Sounds like somebody just realized, oh yeah, European cheese, we can hit that, or whatever. Or maybe they thought they were going to get, or maybe it's Mitch McConnell thinking Jim Beam and the bourbon producers in Kentucky would really like it if Scotch and Irish whiskeys were more expensive. People would turn to American products, even though I don't think they're very comparable. But whatever. Anyway, maybe they thought that was the case, and maybe God punished them by striking the Jim Beam plant and sending 45,000. I don't think God's idea, though, would have been to send 45,000 barrels of bourbon into the river. So sounds like it just could have been an accident. All right, I'm not going to read the rest of the Vox article. Just wanted to let you know that if you're into weird European cheese, well, get the hell out of here, frankly. This is America. But if you want some, go snap it up, and I guess Scotch and Irish whiskey too, and just don't eat the cheese and drive, I guess, is my only warning to you. All right. Or at least don't drive in a small car close with the rest of us, because some of that cheese is pretty stinky. Anyway, another piece that I wanted to share with you here of some interest. Let's see how long the actual letter is. It's not that long. Good, but we can read it. This came to my attention in a roundabout way, but here in the New York Review of Books, which I assure you I wasn't reading on my own, was an article about, well, I'll read you the title. An open letter to the director of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. And there are a couple of names up here at top who are, I guess, the organizers of this letter, but there are hundreds of signatories, historians and the like, who are signatories to this letter, and this is what it's about. On June 17th, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Democrat of New York, as you know, posted an Instagram live video discussing the detention camps along the southern U.S. borders aboard her as concentration camps, in which she used the phrase never again. This drew sharp criticism the following day from Representative Liz Cheney, who has no business talking about this, and others for allegedly misappropriating a slogan associated with the Holocaust. After several days of heated media, and by the way, it is associated with the Holocaust, yes, but the idea of never again is that it be associated with dangerous situations in the future. Never again what? Never again that? Well, I know that never again. That's happened already. So that literally is never happening again. Those people will not be interned in those camps ever again. It's already happened. Never again means that you're supposed to apply it to new situations as a warning. But whatever. You saw how they misplayed this thing and how somebody managed to get the Holocaust Memorial Museum and Yad Vashem both to say that this had been, misappropriated in some way, and that it was improper for them to have done it this way. I really can't figure out how that happened. But at any rate, this letter is in response to them. I'm warned here by Scott Anderson that we appear to have dropped off the air briefly a minute or two ago, but I see everything is now back on. Here's Scott's message to the same effect. So if you missed out on the setup here, what I'm reading is from the New York Review of Books, an open letter to the director of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. Just again, the setup, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's comments about the detention camps being concentration camps and using the phrase never again. This drawing sharp criticism from people who should have kept their mouths shut, including Liz Cheney, for allegedly misappropriating a slogan associated with the Holocaust. After several days of heated media and political debate, the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum released a statement on June 24th, and it's linked in here, condemning the use of Holocaust analogies, which is to say, please close the Holocaust Memorial Museum because we're of no use, basically. We received the following open letter, the New York Review of Books did, addressed to the director of the museum, Sarah J. Bloomfield, delivered by the signatories on July 1st. The editor's note, the text of the letter follows: "We are scholars who strongly support the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum," as most scholars I think would. "Many of us write on the Holocaust and genocide. We have researched in the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum's library and archives, or served as fellows or associated scholars. We've been grateful for the museum's support and intellectual community. Many of us teach the Holocaust at our universities and have drawn on the museum's online resources. We support the museum's programs from workshops to education. We are deeply concerned about the museum's recent statement regarding the museum's position on Holocaust analogies. We write this public letter to urge its retraction. Scholars in the humanities and social sciences rely on careful and responsible analysis, contextualization, comparison, and argumentation to answer questions about the past and the present by, quote, unequivocally rejecting efforts to create analogies between the Holocaust and other events, whether historical or contemporary, unquote. The United States Holocaust Memorial Museum is taking a radical position that is far removed from mainstream scholarship on the Holocaust and genocide, and it makes learning from the past almost impossible. Yes, it obviates the whole mission. The museum's decision to completely reject drawing any possible analogies to the Holocaust or to the events leading up to it is fundamentally ahistorical. It has the potential to inflict severe damage on the museum's ability to continue its role as a credible, leading global institution dedicated to Holocaust memory, Holocaust education, and research in the field of Holocaust and genocide studies. The very core of Holocaust education is to alert the public to dangerous developments that facilitate human rights violations and pain and suffering. Pointing to similarities across time and space is essential for this task. Looking beyond the academic context, we are well aware of the many distortions and inaccuracies, intentional or not, that frame contemporary discussions of the Holocaust. We are not only scholars, we are global citizens who participate in public discourse, as does the museum as an institution and its staff. We therefore consider it essential that the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum reverse its position on careful historical analysis and comparison. We hope the museum continues to help scholars establish the Holocaust's significance as an event from which the world must continue to learn. And it is signed by what appears to be, I don't know, I'm not sure what the number is, but it certainly looks to be over 100 scholars from around the world. And this came to my attention, in fact, because among the signatories is our own Ian Reifowitz, who was just on the air with us the other day and was a proud signatory to this and let everybody know via Twitter, and that's how it came to my attention. And I'm really glad that we're able to not only address this issue, but to attach that he's attached his name to it and that we're able to claim him as one of our own. I'm proud of that. And well done, Ian. I don't think it probably took you more than 2 seconds to figure out that you needed to be a part of this letter, and that's why we're glad to be able to have you as part of the family here. So anyway, I thought that was really important, and it leads me to wonder what would even have made the director of the museum do this. I assume at some point, honestly, my best guess is that they came around and said, whether or not we have overt pressure at this point, it seems to me that this is the sort of thing, given who's cast themselves on which sides here, the president is going to need backing up on this. And he's going to look to you to do it because you're the director of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum and you're supposed to be credible on this issue. I think if you just sign this document and put it out there, the president won't the president is going to start to look for can I, as president of the United States, fire the director or whatever it is of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum or otherwise make her life a living hell until she backs me up on this thing. And the answer is probably no, but LOL, YOLO, NM, nothing matters. And you might as well sign this thing because the president's going to find a way around the law eventually. And you should just do it. I'm guessing that's my best explanation for it. Otherwise, I guess it's possible that you just rise to the position of director of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum without any understanding of what you're doing and why. But I guess anything can happen these days. It's entirely possible. Anyway, the more important point was, I think, the letter and the fact that Ian was a part of it. That made me happy. I was glad to bring that to your attention. All right, let's see. A couple of other things. One I wanted to share was Paul Waldman's piece from the other day, published in the Washington Post under the plumb line. Trump's efforts to rig the census may already be working. We discussed the census situation extensively the other day. And essentially, I'm bringing it to you because he seemed to see much of the same point in all of it and presented it as an organized pattern of thought as opposed to what I did the other day. So I thought I'd share this one with you. One of the characteristic features of Donald Trump's presidency is how he has taken the instructions and practices that used to be considered outside partisanship and above the interests of any one individual and turned them to his own ends. In some cases, it's for his own personal aggrandizement, as he's doing with the 4th of July celebration, and others, as with the 2020 census, it's to use the federal government to advance the interests of the Republican Party. Now, this is a July 2nd piece here, by the way, prescient in that it's written before the public reversal, semi-public reversal, on the fight to pressure the government's way to putting the citizenship question on the questionnaire, regardless of the court's decisions. So, because President Trump and those who work for him are such a bunch of half-witted bumblers, they can't help but make their bad faith and corrupt intent obvious to all. Unfortunately, even if they can't manage to get a citizenship question added to the census, they may already have achieved their goal of frightening immigrants from participating to enhance the political power of white people in the GOP. This is the point that I was trying to squeeze in at the very end, where the second plaintiff's attorney in the phone conference is trying to make the point that what are we going to do about a president who's just going to continue to use his platform as president to insist that the question is going to be there and that somehow the census is going to be a vehicle used to go after, identify, and get the entirety, I guess, of the immigrant community and frighten them into non-participation in the census, which is what he wanted out of this question in the first place. And this was before the reversal and before the phone conference that Paul is writing this one. So very interesting. This was, as he says, always the unmistakable goal. As recently discovered documents revealed, a Republican consultant with a specialty in gerrymandering worked closely with the Trump administration in preparing to add the citizenship question. His analysis showed that doing so would give an electoral advantage to Republicans and non-Hispanic whites, as he put it, by discouraging immigrants, including not just the undocumented, but those here legally as well, from answering the census, thereby making their communities look smaller than they actually are, so they could be deprived of resources and representation. Then, the administration concocted a preposterous cover story, claiming that the purpose of the citizenship question was to properly enforce the Voting Rights Act. Even Chief Justice Roberts ruled that that was contrived, but instead of simply barring the airports, I guess. The Commerce Department. Did I say barring the airports? Instead of simply barring the Commerce Department, which oversees the Census Bureau, from adding the question, he essentially granted them a do-over, telling them to come up with a different explanation, presumably one that will not be such an obvious lie. Time, and the second anyway, was now getting short, and the Census Bureau was supposed to begin printing the hundreds of millions necessary forms this Monday, which is actually the day before this article was published. And when Trump was asked why it's so important to add a citizenship question to the census, he too was unable to come up with any explanation that could sound remotely credible. Well, who would have bet on that? But here's what his bumbling statement was. I think it's very important to find out if somebody's a citizen as opposed to an illegal, which this wouldn't tell you. I think that there's a big difference to me between being a citizen of the United States and being an illegal. And you know, the Democrats want to treat the illegals with health care and with other things better than they treat the citizens of our country. If you look at a coal miner, that has black lung disease, you're talking about people that get treated better than the coal miner. Well, Paul's right on this one right away. First of all, even the question, as the administration wants to ask it, doesn't determine if anyone is illegal. And it asks only if people in the household are or are not citizens. The latter would, of course, include people who are in the country legally but aren't citizens, such as green card holders. Maybe Trump knows that, maybe not. On Trump's odd tangent about sick coal miners, you will not be surprised to learn that Trump and the Republicans have been trying to undermine protections and compensations for coal miners with black lung disease. So that's not going to work either. What's important about all this is Trump is saying that the reason we need to inquire about citizenship is to locate undocumented immigrants and make sure they don't receive any government benefits, and not, say, to enforce the Voting Rights Act. Most importantly, Trump seems to think that the census is some kind of an enforcement arm of immigration and customs enforcement, attempting to find out if somebody's a citizen as opposed to an illegal. As the Census Bureau itself notes, it does not share information with law enforcement agencies. That'll go out the window, of course. That, too, is something Trump might or might not be aware of. But what we can say for certain is that he would like people to believe it's not true. Nothing would make Trump happier than if every immigrant thought that filling out the census form would mean that ICE agents would be busting down their doors. The more frightened immigrants are of census takers, the less likely they'll be to answer the census, which will accomplish the goal of enhancing the political power of Republicans and whites. Unfortunately, by now that goal has probably been largely accomplished, and as the lawyers in the conference call were saying, he's going to continue that program and there's no way for us to stop him. While I'd predict that Chief Justice Roberts will reverse his position and allow the citizenship question to be included once the administration comes up with some marginally less ludicrous rationale, even if he doesn't, the damage has already been done. It's been done not just by this controversy, but by all the actions of Trump and his administration, the constant demonization of immigrants, the stepped-up ICE raids, the brutalization of asylum seekers arriving at the border, especially children, The move to deport legal immigrants if they take advantage of government benefits for which they're eligible. The endless insistence that we desperately need a border wall. Every day of this presidency, he's told immigrants, including those here illegally, that the federal government is not just hostile to them, but will find any excuse it can to kick them out of the country. So you could hardly blame any immigrant, or millions of immigrants, for not just reluctance to tell a census worker their citizenship status, but not wanting to talk to them at all, which is exactly what Trump and the Republicans have been after. So a good reminder, succinctly put, and giving us enough time to talk about one or two other things as well, including on a more local note, I guess. I thought this was at least of some interest here. A report from The Hill. I'm sure there's a better source for it somewhere, but we'll give you at least the headline. Oregon governor prepared to use executive powers to pass climate legislation after GOP walkout. You remember that the Republican senators up in Oregon took off in order to avoid taking a vote on an important environmental matter. Well, Oregon Governor Kate Brown, a Democrat, said that she's prepared to use her executive powers to pass legislation aimed at cutting carbon emissions after a landmark climate bill was killed in the state legislature following a walkout staged by Republican lawmakers. Ooh, she's using Obama-like language here. Let me be very, very clear. I am not backing down, Brown told reporters while discussing House Bill 2020, interestingly enough, at a press conference Monday after the sweeping climate bill which sought to cap greenhouse gas emissions in the state was killed on Saturday. Working on legislation is my preferred approach, collaborating across the aisle and around the state, she said, according to the Willamette Week. However, given the uncertainty that now permeates Oregon's political system, like whether there's a legitimate one or not, I am also directing my staff and agencies to explore alternative paths in case these collaborative approaches do not lead to successful legislation. This includes the use of my executive powers and direction of state agencies, she added. So, goes on from there and describes some of the background, but I think the important part there is good for her. Whether or not there's a clear path to that, at this point, I think basically it's something you should be threatening at every turn regardless, and it may be the only way we see these things even continue to be a topic of discussion in the public arena, if all you have to do to avoid it is run away. So, all right, very interesting. Glad that that came up and that she's properly exercising the muscles there from her executive perch in Oregon. All right, I think that is probably all we're going to be able to fit in terms of new and entire stories before we close up shop here for the week. We'll be back on Monday, of course, and hope you enjoy your extended weekend. Let's see if there's one or two more things that we might be able to note. Well, this seems like a fun one. How about this? We can do this one rather shortly and quickly, too. Just a fun note before we close things down entirely from The Independent over in the UK. I guess this is actually an older piece, but it was being recirculated in the wake of her visit to the G20, I guess. This is actually a piece from August of 2017. Indian diplomat likens Ivanka Trump to, quote, half-wit Saudi prince, unquote, ahead of summit where she will lead U.S. delegation. And this was actually, I guess, her first crack at leading a U.S. delegation back in August of 2017. A summit, I don't even remember which, the Global Entrepreneurship Summit, I guess, in November of 2017. Just wanted to, note that for the record. Yes, that the rest of the world is pretty much in tune with not only where she is, but that they've had practice in the past. The Saudish Arabians have given them, people around the world, plenty of practice of what to do with dimwit kids who can wrangle their way into these international diplomatic summits by virtue of their relationship with the head of state there. Okay, so just in case you were wondering about whether or not the other governments of the world understood properly what to do with these people. Don't forget that the Saudis have trained them well. Okay, so just about time for us to close things out and get our music queued up, and that gives us plenty of time, though, to tell you what's coming up on the rest of the programming day, or at least the next hour of the programming day here on Netroots Radio. It is, of course, Justice Putnam's West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and this gives me plenty of time to read you a much-reduced blurb about what's coming up. Well, starting off in the Bistro Cafe, as he puts it. Germany penalized Facebook for underreporting hate speech. They're big on that in Germany, and on regulatory issues as well. Then, on the rest of the menu, California Governor Gavin Newsom signed a measure that bans schools and employers from discriminating against wearing natural hairstyles. The FBI said it conveniently lost all the files of the white nationalist hate site Stormfront. Is that right? Yeah, wow. All the files. Amazingly lost, along with all of that Jim Beam bourbon, I guess. And the American Revolution shows how sad and thin Trump's vision of the country is, or at least his idea of what happened there. After the break, they move on to the chef's table, where an enforcer of Duterte's Philippine drug war shrugged off the police killing of a toddler. My goodness. And the leaders of Israel and Serbia have perfected the politics of persuasion, but that strategy won't keep working. We'll find out what that's all about next. All that and more on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef de Cuisine, Justice Putnam.
From
next.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Well, thanks very much, everybody. I don't think we're entirely signed off since we'll be back and on Twitter for the balance of Friday and probably throughout the weekend as more ridiculousness happens. I think Trump will keep himself busy continuing to be dead, this time up at the Bedminster Golf Course where he always planned to build a mausoleum anyway. So we'll see what he does over the weekend.